Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up on the show, a special look at cities in Canada, including what are the top concerns for urban centres and how can accountability and responsibility be better matched, plus a wish list for building better cities. That's all ahead. First, what makes one city great and another so-so? Here's what you need to know. The list of what makes a city great is subjective, but tends to include quality of life issues like affordability, crime levels and homelessness, commute times, and access to healthcare. With those in mind, Edmonton has been ranked tops in Canada, followed by Calgary, Ottawa, Vancouver, and Mississauga. A ranking that considers pollution level, commute times, and cost of living might favor smaller urban centres. But on a global ranking of cities by Oxford Economics, cities are weighted on factors that include its economic vitality, the human capital available for work, the quality of life there, the environment, and the governance. On that list, only 5 Canadian cities make the top 100, with Toronto ranking at number 20. Also on the list, Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, and Ottawa. With 44% of Canadians saying housing affordability is their top concern, that puts it high on the list of problems for cities to solve. Vancouver ranks top as the least affordable city based on percentage of income needed for a mortgage payment at 124.6 for the non-condo market and an average annual salary requirement of $341,000. Toronto is also unaffordable, with mortgage payments eating up 80% of incomes in the non-condo market and an annual income of more than $275,000 required to buy the average home. And infrastructure is a top quality of life issue. The infrastructure gap for just transportation and water is pegged at more than $224 billion in Canada. Building great cities depends a lot on the fabric of those places, on infrastructure and housing, and on public spaces that work. Mary Rowe is president and CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute. Mary, thanks for being with us.
No, my pleasure. Nice to see you.
It feels like for cities, and maybe this is just the reality of your fiscal situation, but some of our infrastructure issues take a backseat, that we sort of forget that this is the underpinning of our lives and our economies. What's your recommendation for keeping that top of mind for urban centers?
Well, nobody needs to really be told it anymore because you just walk out your door and you can see it. And as you say, the city and places across the country are experiencing particular kinds of strains because we're aging, just like you and I are, Amanda, so are our communities. And so part of it is trying to figure out how we're going to invest in keeping, like we have to keep our house maintained, we have to keep our bodies maintained, we need to keep all the built environment around us maintained, and in infrastructure and investing. The important thing, though, is that investing in these different kinds of infrastructures, of which there are many, many, many kinds, it creates jobs. It creates wealth, it creates economic opportunity, and it's good for the climate and it's good for the economy. It's kind of a win-win to invest in the built environment.
There are different ways we could see it happening. Some of them, of course, a new road. We know there's a lot of appeal to that. You can actually point to kind of quick outcomes and returns on that. Less sexy, maybe, replacing aging water infrastructure, but super important, less visible. It feels like we're investing in something that already exists. If you were to stack or rank the places you want to see this stuff happen, how much of it is below that waterline, literally invisible to most of us?
You're like asking to tell me your favorite child. It's all of it has to be focused on at the same time. The interesting thing, though, is communities have different sets of challenges. So in some communities, as we're seeing across the country, the particular pressures that wildfires are putting on communities means that you need to invest differently in those parts of the country that have that kind of challenge. Maybe we have other parts where traffic and investments in transit are the priority. So it has to be done on a place-based place priority basis. And that's one of the challenges with funding infrastructure. It's not one size fits all ever. But what you need is a blended approach, and you need a collaborative approach between the federal government, the provincial government, and local governments, and also increasingly the private sector. And you're right, there's a lot that's invisible. It's not just the stuff we see, but there are fabulous people working across the country. They're called asset managers. They run evaluations and risk management exercises all the time. And so we need to be really listening to the expertise that tell us, in this particular community, you better start with that. Right. And with that community, you better start with this.
On that same front, it can often feel to those of us outside of the circle of knowledge that there's kind of the right hand not knowing what the left is doing. Is there enough planning and efficiencies being brought to, you think of kind of urban infrastructure improvements, and it often feels like nobody realized they were ripping up every north-south street in Toronto for 3 months. Are there people who are planning this and we just don't know about it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the kind of typical thing that people complain about. And, I always want to remind people, if you're complaining about the traffic, think about the alternative. If you have a city that doesn't have much going on, then you don't have a lot of traffic and you don't have the kind of competition that we see in our denser urban environments across the country between infrastructure investment and construction and new buildings and all that kind of thing. I think the better way to say this is that we need better alignment. We need orders of government and departments within municipalities and with the province and feds to have line of sight into what each is doing. And I think the dilemma we have now, to be frank, is that we're still dealing with a post-COVID environment where lots of projects were shelved because they had to be, and then suddenly there's a surfeit of them, as you and I can see on streets everywhere, and you're left with, why the heck are they replacing that sidewalk when they're also trying to build a new building there? It's not always going to be like that, and I think we should all kind of adjust our expectation here. Cities are extraordinarily complex. Investing in infrastructure, really, really expensive and complex, needs a lot of coordination. Like any building site, imagine you're trying to build just a building. Then if you're trying to do 6 buildings and you're trying to also put new water lines in and all that stuff. So I think the governments are getting better at this. They're getting better because they co-fund now. And so the idea is that you create these pro formas that show what the sequencing is. Could we do a better job at that? Absolutely. But let's just remember that a bustling, creative city is going to have lots of stuff going on. And just consider the alternative. Nothing going on.
So good to have you. Appreciate your time.
Good to see you.
Mary Rowe is president and CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute. Coming up, from crime rates to traffic, our lives are made better or worse by how a city functions. Stay with us.